A virus appears on a cruise ship. People die. Passengers are quarantined. Governments coordinate across borders. Mainstream outlets start running the same words, the same emotional beats, the same public health phrases. Deadly virus. International monitoring. Low risk to the public. Authorities are responding. Do not panic. And instantly, millions of people have the same thought. We have seen this episode before. Not because everyone is stupid, not because everyone is a conspiracy theorist, but because after COVID, the public was trained to recognize the pattern. A strange disease, a frightened population, a media class speaking in unison, government agencies following the science, and anyone asking obvious questions being told they are dangerous. So now we have Hantavirus, or more specifically Andy's Hantavirus, linked to the cruise ship MV Hondius, and the internet has already given it the nickname COVID 2.0. But the real question is not whether this is literally the next COVID. The real question is this a genuine public health warning, or are we watching another rehearsal of the emergency script? Establish the facts, then pivot. Let's start with the facts, because that is where this gets interesting. According to the World Health Organization, by late May 2026, there were 13 cases and 3 deaths linked to the MV Hondius outbreak. So no, this is not imaginary. People have been seriously ill. People have died. That matters. The virus involved is Andy's virus, a type of hantavirus. Hantaviruses are usually associated with rodents, contaminated urine, droppings, saliva, dust, not the kind of respiratory spread we associate with COVID. But Andy's virus is different in one very important way. It is the only hantavirus known to spread between humans, usually through close or prolonged contact. So the official position is basically this. Yes, it is serious. Yes, it can be deadly. Yes, some human-to-human transmission may have happened, but no, this does not currently look like COVID 2.0. The CDC says the pandemic risk is extremely low. The ECDC says the risk to the general European population is very low. WHO says the global risk is low. That is the official story. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Even if the official story is true, many people no longer believe the official storyteller, and that is the problem. The fakery question. When people say this feels fake, we need to be precise. They may not mean the virus is fake. They may mean the presentation feels fake. The media packaging feels fake. The moral pressure feels fake. The sudden uniformity feels fake. The emotional choreography feels fake. And honestly, that is not a crazy observation. Because the modern media system does not need a secret meeting to act coordinated. It is coordinated by incentives. Newsrooms pull from the same wire copy. Health reporters quote the same agencies. Editors choose the same fear words because fear gets clicks. Politicians repeat the same abundance of caution language. Platforms reward panic, outrage, and certainty. Influencers then react to the panic, creating a second panic about the first panic. Nobody has to send the memo. The system writes the memo by itself. And that is why these stories feel scripted. Not necessarily because every journalist is lying, but because the machine has a template. The COVID trust collapse. This is where COVID becomes impossible to ignore. During COVID, governments around the world discovered something. Fear works. Emergency powers work. Moral pressure works. Public shaming works. Censorship by platform works. Trust the experts works, at least for a while. But they also discovered something else. You can only overplay your hand so many times before people stop believing you. People remember the contradictions. They remember when things that were dismissed as conspiracy theories later became acceptable to discuss. They remember being told not to ask certain questions. They remember the social pressure. They remember the restrictions. They remember politicians breaking their own rules. They remember schools closed, businesses destroyed, families divided, and then being told that if they had doubts, they were the problem. So now, when another outbreak appears and the same words come back, quarantine, monitoring, public risk, international response, misinformation, people do not hear calm public health language. They hear the opening music. They think, this is Act 1. And that is not because the public suddenly became irrational. It is because trust was spent like it was unlimited. It wasn't. Dress rehearsal framing. So is Hantavirus a dress rehearsal? That is the question people are asking, whether respectable media wants to admit it or not. A dress rehearsal for what? Not necessarily a fake pandemic. That is too simplistic. The more interesting possibility is that outbreaks like this become live fire exercises for the modern emergency state. Can governments track people across borders? Can they enforce quarantine? Can they coordinate with airlines, ports, health agencies, and police? Can they control the story before alternative narratives take over? Can they get the public to accept unusual restrictions again? Can they identify which parts of the population will comply and which parts will resist? That does not mean the virus was created for that purpose. It means a real outbreak can still be used as a test. That is the distinction people miss. A crisis does not have to be fake to be exploited. A threat does not have to be manufactured to be useful. And after COVID, only a very naive person would believe governments look at emergencies and think, let's be careful not to accumulate any extra power here. Be serious. Emergency powers are addictive. Once institutions learn what they can do during a crisis, they do not forget. Why the media script matters. Now, look at the language. This is always where the script reveals itself. We are told the risk is low. Fine. But then passengers are quarantined for up to 42 days. We are told not to panic. Fine. But then the headlines lead with deadly virus and global concern. We are told this is not COVID. Fine. But then every visual cue reminds you of COVID. Masks, isolation, cruise ships, health officials, travel monitoring, agency briefings. So which is it? Is this a low public risk or is this a major emergency? Because the public notices when the emotional message and the factual message do not match. The factual message says, stay calm. The emotional message says, be afraid but responsibly. That is the weird psychological space these stories occupy. And that is where conspiracy narratives grow. Not in the facts alone, in the gap between what officials say and what the system makes people feel. The bold conclusion. So is Hantavirus COVID 2.0? Medically, based on what we know right now, probably not. Politically, culturally, psychologically, that is a different question. Because COVID 2.0 does not have to mean the same virus. It can mean the same script, the same fear cycle, the same institutional choreography, the same media amplification, the same moral pressure, the same do not ask questions atmosphere, the same convenient expansion of emergency logic. And this is the real danger. Not merely that governments are lying. Sometimes they are. Not merely that the media is fake. Sometimes it is. The deeper danger is that even when a threat is real, the institutions explaining it are so distrusted that millions of people assume manipulation before information. That is what happens when you burn credibility. You do not get to act shocked when people smell smoke. So maybe Hantavirus is not COVID 2.0. Maybe it is something more revealing. A test of whether the public will still accept the emergency script. And the early answer seems to be not without questions, not without receipts, not again. Because after COVID, the burden of proof has changed. It is no longer enough for officials to say, trust us. The public has a new question now. Show us the data. Show us the incentives. Show us who benefits. And until they do, every outbreak will come with the same suspicion. Is this the signal, or is this the rehearsal? Subscribe if you want more videos separating genuine threats from manufactured panic. And comment below, do you think this is just another isolated outbreak, or are we watching the emergency script being warmed up again?